Let's talk this over with our panel. With me now is Josh Rogan, Washington Post columnist, Ryan Lizza, Washington correspondent for The New Yorker, and CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, also a federal prosecutor. Ryan Lizza, the problem is the voters don't have really much information at all to go on. I mean, in this letter to Congress, Comey acknowledges, and this is a quote, he says, the FBI cannot yet assess whether or not this material may be significant. What are voters supposed to do with this?
Well, it's difficult because none of us have all of the information. You know, the more I have thought about this, look, I do believe that it's an important principle here that the Justice Department has, this, rule, though it's not in law, it's a guideline that 60 days before an election, investigations that are politically sensitive are just not commented on. Sometimes in some of the reporting, it's been said here, it's been said today that sometimes they don't even issue subpoenas because they might leak out. But this is an extraordinary circumstance in that Comey, think about it, he's being told by the leadership of the Justice Department, including reportedly Loretta, the Attorney General, right? But he's also promised, or he's also testified before Congress, that he has wrapped up this investigation. I think if Bill Clinton hadn't wandered onto the Attorney General's plane a few months ago and made her a sort of political lightning rod in this case, that maybe Comey wouldn't have sent the letter. But the fact that he was being told not to, essentially, by Justice Department leadership, might have actually had the opposite effect. And he might have said, you know what, if it comes out after the election that I was being told not to do this and I didn't disclose it, that's even worse. But
is he then trying to save face for, the Bureau, for the FBI? And frankly, it was unprecedented when he came out in July and held that press conference and made those remarks saying she was, quote, extremely careless, but no prosecutor would actually have a case here. That alone, those comments alone were unprecedented. And then because he did that, he felt like he had to do this.
Right. Well, that's exactly right. I mean, if we're to believe that James Comey did this to protect his own reputation and that of his institution, then that definitely came at the expense of the greater issue, not just Hillary Clinton, but also the public understanding, because he's released just enough information to stir a controversy, but not enough information to figure out what's going on. And as you pointed out, it's not really about the last 60 days. I've been covering national security for over a decade in this town, and the FBI never, almost never comments on ongoing investigations. 60 days, a year, 3 years. There's a good reason for that. Is because tiny bits of information can have an outsized effect, especially when they're exaggerated for politics.
Let me push back on that, because I've been thinking a lot about that in the last 24 hours. This sort of unwritten rule of 60 days out in a political race, you don't comment. Actually, isn't that, one could argue, the most important time to comment, but to give voters the totality of the information, right? Because they're voting for the next commander-in-chief. They're voting for their next leader. So don't they deserve to know what's going on, but not in drips and drabs?
Well, I don't think so, because there's no totality. Unless they release every single transcript of everything, which they're not going to do, it's always somebody curating, somebody deciding what the public has a right and a right not to know.
Okay, but why couldn't they? Lonnie Davis, Laura, jump in here. Lonnie Davis, who's obviously a big, former attorney with the Clintons and a big Clinton supporter. He's going to be on the show later tonight with me. He said bring 200, 300 agents in and work around the clock for the next 24 hours and just put all the emails that you have out into the public domain and let people pour through them themselves. That is feasible.
And it is, Poppy. The thing here is that the court of public opinion may thrive on innuendos, but the court of law does not. And the FBI's role is in the court of law, essentially, to say, listen, here are the facts, here are the evidence that we have. When you have this sort of generic or vague description that you essentially may have a box that says the word Hillary on it, and therefore we're going to draw our conclusions from that, we're going to update based on that generic, non-specific basis, you're left with just having innuendo. And that's exactly the reason that the Justice Department does not want pending investigations commented on. Not because of the timing, not just because of timing, not just because it's a presidential election, not just because it's Hillary Clinton, but because we do not know what those emails contain. And perhaps the more prudent course, you're right, perhaps was not to talk about it in July, but also if I can just be a little bit more fair to Comey for a second and say, Well, Loretta Lynch did something that was unprecedented as well when she said prior to Comey's July press conference, I am just going to defer to the finding of the FBI in terms of their decision to whether or not to charge. Well, what she did there was remove herself from really her key role, which is prosecutorial discretion. And James Comey has run with that torch ever since. And frankly, it has had a domino effect that is more than inconvenient to Hillary Clinton. It is politically unpalatable to every voter.
And remember, she said that after, Ryan Lizza, quickly here, she said that after Bill Clinton walked onto her plane for 30 minutes on the tarmac in Phoenix. She came out after and said, well, we only talked about golf and grandkids, and by the way, I'm going to, go with the FBI here. Yeah,
which was the right thing to do. I agree with you, Poppy. The point you were making before, the more I have thought about this is, as a journalist, my view is more disclosure is always better. And, the voters are not children. They're getting a lot of information, actually, about what's going on. And I think people can actually process this with 11 days to go and make a decision about whether they're really bothered by this one way or another.
Guys, thank you. Stay with me. I got to get a break in. You'll be back, I promise. Thank you all very much.